Hey there, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's market overview and a few earnings stocks to watch. Interesting action in the markets last week with the Fed, right? Got a little bit of a pullback, but then actually recovered nicely on Friday. And I got to tell you, some of these charts are looking pretty interesting sector wise coming into next week. Now, we're through a bulk of the big earnings like the S&P 500 names and Dow Jones names, but still have a lot of companies that are going to be reporting this week. It's actually going to be a pretty big week for me. There's several small and mid cap names that are going to be reporting that, some that I have positions in and some that I'm looking to potentially start positions in. So could be a pretty active week for me. But let's go ahead and take a look at what the individual sectors are kind of telling us, right? So IBB actually a little bit of a bounce on Friday. Still looks, kind of like a bear flag here on the daily. One of the sectors that I guess I would be most concerned about is the IBB just because of that bear flag formation on the daily. IWM was coming up into resistance. We started to see a little bit of weakness, and then actually on Friday, we got a little bit of a pop, and we might actually be trying to take out this area of price resistance. So, closed nearly at the high of the day on Friday, and then with this week coming up, all these earnings from smaller cap companies, this could be the catalyst that either breaks us out or breaks us down. We'll have to see how it plays out, but we're starting to see what could be this. I mean, if you look, we've got a potential reverse head and shoulders pattern here on a longer time frame, and then we've even got another one here kind of on a shorter time frame, right? So we've got a couple of reverse head and shoulder pattern there that I think are interesting. Maybe we see some strength. We see a follow through of a breakout in the small caps. So definitely keeping an eye on that this week. IYT reverse head and shoulders pattern there. Pulled back basically to the neckline, found a little bit of support and bounced. Also happen to have a couple of moving averages there. We've got the 50 and the 200 day. So transportation looking like it's kind of holding up a little bit. QQQs with the help of strong earnings out of Apple and Microsoft and those guys. Actually, the Qs are holding up fairly well. Semiconductors, a little bit of a pullback there. We popped up into some potential resistance, pulling back, and close this gap, right? But actually holding up fairly well. So maybe we just need a bit of time to consolidate before we determine which direction our next move is. S&P 500, real close to all-time highs, holding up fairly well. TZA and TVIX, I've got these in there. It was looking like we might get a bounce in volatility and a bounce in TZA if the small caps were going to roll over. And you know what? We just didn't get that follow through. We actually look as though we might start heading lower. So these have been difficult short-term trades. They just aren't getting that follow through. So, but if we do see, any kind of a dramatic move lower, it's good to have these things in the back of your head as potential short-term trading opportunities. Just don't chase them because, like I said, the follow through has not been there. So, if you're going to dip, make sure you dip size appropriate. And sometimes these can be difficult trades to hold overnight. So keep that in mind. USO pulling back to an area of potential price support. We've got the 50-day moving average. We've also got the 200-day there. We'll see, oil pulled back off of some inventory build numbers. We'll see how it reacts this week. I'm disappointed that energy names never seem to get the lift with oil, which is a bit disappointing. So that is a sector that I've kind of, taken off my list as a priority sector to keep an eye on, just because it was unable to get any lift, even with oil ripping higher. So home builders continue to grind higher. Basically had the Fed say that they're standing pat. They're really not doing anything. They're not cutting. They're not raising. They're just kind of going to sit back and see what happens with the data. And we'll see how that all plays out. But home builders continuing to grind higher. Thicker stocks typically, and more swing trade opportunities, but a lot of them have already had pretty decent moves. So not really focusing on the home building space. XLB, building materials, a little bit of a pullback, potentially finding some price support as well as moving average support. We'll see if that gets any follow through. XLE, like I said, the energy names really disappointing. Didn't get any follow through. Could be coming up to an area of potential price support, but not one of my favorite spaces. Not heading into next week anyway. Let's see what else we've got here. Financials, continuing to hold up well with the Fed on pause. I think that's probably good for the financials. But there are several names within that space that have already made some pretty decent moves. Industrials holding up fairly well, consolidating. I mean, overall, look, we're not seeing any reason for some of these sectors to get out, right? Might just continue to see some consolidation in the industrial space. Consumer staples. So, Beyond Meats, what a freaking crazy IPO that had. Unbelievable run. Consumer staples, packaged foods. I think some of those names are getting some lift. It's a tough space, but I do think maybe worth keeping an eye on. Maybe try to find some potential sympathy plays with the Beyond Meats. But I think Beyond Meats is probably going to have a pullback in the near term here. So we'll see how that plays out. XLV healthcare. So, we have a head and shoulders reversal pattern on the daily on that as well. XLV coming up into potential moving average resistance as well as trend line resistance. We'll see how it plays out. But, big, thick stocks, more swing or long-term hold type plays, names like Pfizer, United Health, and stuff like that. But definitely worth keeping an eye on the space. One healthcare name that I am keeping an eye on, well, we'll talk about it in a minute when we get to the earnings stocks that I do have on the radar for this week. Consumer discretionary, we are consolidating after a big run up. We're at an area of potential resistance. Actually would like to see, what is this? 119, 118 hold as support. Maybe continue to consolidate. XOP, oil and exploration, looks just like XLE. Not looking all that great there. And then retail actually is consolidating. Not one of my favorite spaces, but consolidating a bit here. We'll see. We'll see what happens. There's one other one I want to bring to your attention. XAR, aerospace and defense. Let me put that up here for a minute. Where is it? Okay, aerospace and defense right here. Also, kind of have a reverse head and shoulders pattern there. Coming up into an area of price resistance. One of the names that I do like in the space happened to have a very nice pop on Friday. MAXR. It was actually, let's take a look here. It was on last week's Pro Members Stocks to Watch, and actually one that I have a trade plan on and am in. Did take a little bit off on this pop because they have earnings this week, and I'm actually kind of expecting another kitchen sink quarter from these guys. New CEO, new management team, looking for a kitchen sink quarter. They announced the fact that they got full recovery insurance claim on this failed satellite, $183 million, I believe it was. That's what gave it a little lift, but I'm still, they still have a lot to address with the balance sheet. They got a lot of debt. Like I said, I expect another kitchen sink quarter. I'd like to see the thing pull back, and I actually would add and probably add a bit more aggressively, depending on what they have to say in their call. This is a long-term hold, turnaround play, and pull back into the 450, even all the way back to a double bottom test in the $4 area would be very compelling for me for maxers. So keeping an eye on that for this week. Katos also on my list. I'm not sure if when they report. I don't think they report this week, but definitely keeping an eye on Kato. So I do like the aerospace and defense sector as well. All right, so what else we got coming up next week? Let's take a look real quick. We've got not as much economic data as we had last week. That jobs number was pretty damn impressive on Friday. That's what gave us a bit of a boost, I think, after a little bit of weakness from the Fed meeting. Next week, we've got trade deficit, PPI, producer price index. We've got wholesale inventories, consumer price index, core CPI. Not a whole lot in terms of economic data to move the markets, but we do have still a very active week for earnings, right? So there are actually quite a few names on this list, and quite a few names that aren't on this list that are definitely on my radar for next week. I mean, Chesapeake and Regeneron and Viacom and let's see, Axon. I mean, there are a lot of names here that are of interest to me. I'm not looking to trade all of them. And then there are some names that I just want to keep an eye on, see how they impact their particular sector, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those names are. Let's hop right into it. Let me pull this. I've got so last week I was at Planet Micro Cap Conference here in Las Vegas. It was a really cool event. I got to see presentations from a lot of different micro cap companies. I know that not a lot of people feel comfortable trading micro caps. I, on the other hand, will dabble in that space, and it was really cool. I mean, I think I found at least. I like to go to events like this and at least be able to say I walked away with one really good idea, and I actually think I walked away with 3 or 4. I'll be sharing those with the pro members shortly. All right, so let's get into the list of stocks to watch for next week. Earnings. Paratium. So this is an interesting low float name. They have earnings coming up. It's got an interesting setup on the daily. You got a rising 50-day moving average. You've got the 50 above the 200. All the moving averages are actually sloping up fairly nicely. You're flirting with the potential $5 holla, and they report on Tuesday after the close. Now, stochastics are nearing overbought. Maybe this runs into the earnings, and then you get a bit of a pullback after the earnings. Could be a little lotto play, to maybe look to take a position heading into earnings. See if you get any kind of break over 5 heading into earnings. I probably would look to take some off if you get close to 580, 575 or so ahead of earnings, and then maybe keep a little lotto through the actual earnings event. But don't, not enough to damage you if they report, disappointing earnings or give a bad guide. But if you get a good earnings report and a good guide, maybe give you a little extra profit if it gaps and goes, right? So kind of looking at the setup here, I like it. It probably would have been a better entry at about $4.30 or so, or closer to $4 for a little bit of a bounce play. $3.80, $4 for a bounce play. But still like the setup. I think it's a fairly constructive setup heading into earnings. Worth keeping an eye on. Maybe for a day trading opportunity if they report better than expected earnings. You don't want to take the risk of going into earnings, or possibly a higher risk swing heading into earnings. So worth keeping an eye on. Like I said, I personally would like to get an entry close to $4.30 or so. $4.30, $4.50 maybe. maybe dip the toe. All right, NVTA, Diagnostics Research Company. I believe these guys have earnings this week. And what I like about this setup is it's all-time highs. You're in blue sky territory with this now. 66.5 million shares in the float. They report Tuesday after the close, right? So great looking setup on the daily here, kind of riding that 50-day moving average, looking for a break over $25 with some conviction. You've got stochastics, which are starting to curl up. Trades decent volume, and you're flirting with that blue sky all-time high. So worth keeping an eye on NVTA after earnings, potentially for a day trading opportunity, maybe even a swing. Worth having on the radar there. HEAR, low float name. Had big rip roaring move back here after it did a reverse split and came out with some blowout earnings. Still having tremendous earnings, but has been beaten down pretty badly. I do have just a little piece in HEAR because of the fact that it is a low float. It's just a leftover lotto play. It did very well in this name, but if they report, the problem with this company is always seems to be that they try to sandbag, and that just doesn't work in their favor. So concerns that you're going to see that headset growth slow. That could be a possibility, but it's a low float stock. And if they can report good numbers and give a good guide, maybe not be quite as conservative as they typically are, maybe this gets a nice lift. And I think, this has got a fairly high short interest as well. Maybe you get a little squeezy there, looking for potential, day trading opportunity. Maybe even look to add to my longer term hold swing. But we'll see how it plays out. They report Wednesday after the close. So we'll see how that plays out next week for Turtle Beach. Dropbox actually has got a great looking setup on the daily here. It's already had a pretty nice run into earnings. You're consolidating just below the 200-day moving average. And what we've got here basically, actually, you know what? I should have had it like this. You can draw these lines any way you want, but look, I like to have as many points of contact as possible. So hit here, then we hit here, and we kind of finally broke through this trend line. Now we are at an area of potential price resistance, right? You can see where it acted as support and now acting as resistance. And then we've got the 200-day moving average right there. So it's got an interesting setup heading into earnings. They report Thursday after the close. Now, you may get a pop over the 200-day heading into the earnings. Maybe get up into the 26.50 area where we've got some potential price resistance. And then if they report disappointing earnings, you get a pullback in the stock. So maybe get could be a trading opportunity ahead of earnings, and then you get out, set on the sidelines, and then maybe it doesn't do that at all. Maybe it just consolidates into earnings, and if they beat, then you get a break over the 200-day, and maybe we get more of a substantial move that lasts 3-4 days like we had back here. We'll see how it plays out, but this is a bit thicker of a stock, right? It's got 386 million shares in the float, so it's really more of a swing or long-term hold consideration than a day trading opportunity in my mind. So, but worth keeping an eye on. I like the setup on the daily. GWPH, look at this beast. Look, I'm not really looking to trade GWPH, but I am interested to see how their earnings come in and maybe how they impact the overall pot space. So interesting news last week. I just found out about this weekend was that Las Vegas has actually passed marijuana lounges in Las Vegas. I did not know that, and actually I think that's a pretty big deal. So that could have me watching some cannabis plays next week, or looking to get some entries going. But it's pretty big news in Las Vegas. GWPH is not a recreational. I mean, they're a full blown biotech company, epilepsy drug, but I want to see how the stock performs off of earnings and how that may impact the cannabis space. And if you look at this on a monthly time frame, it's flirting also with all-time highs, blue skies. So interesting setup there on GWPH. And then Disney, so I went and saw Avengers Endgame. I managed to avoid all the spoilers and went and saw it this weekend. Great movie. 3 hours long. It is a long movie, but it was a fantastic movie. Theater was packed. I mean, it was freaking packed. The movie's done over $2 billion, setting records. It's on pace to become the highest grossing movie ever, just behind Avatar. The thing is that, Disney has had a huge move off of the streaming service and now the Avengers Endgame. And I'm hoping that Disney reports and disappoints, or the guide disappoints, or maybe this is all, already priced in. Where I would love to see Disney come back to is about the 119 to 117 area, 119, 115 area, somewhere in that area. This is a stock I think you buy and you put in your long-term hold account. You just broke out of a multi-year consolidation. Now let's go back. Let's retest that area as potential support. And I think it's a good place to take an entry for a long-term hold. One you buy and put in your IRA or in your kids' college fund, man, and just let it go. Because they have got a lineup coming out for the rest of the summer. Star Wars, Frozen 2, Toy Story 4, Lion King, Aladdin. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, these guys are going to continue to print money. So definitely, but they're going to burn money too with the new streaming service. So interesting. Also, they also sold, I think, some of their sports franchise or sports programming to Sinclair Broadcasting for, I think, 10 point something billion dollars. So a lot going on there with Disney. Definitely keeping an eye on it, but I want to buy it on a pullback. I want to buy it on weakness for a long-term hold consideration. Pull all the way back, man. Pull all the way back to 114. Pull all the way back to $100. That'd be great. I'd love it there. All right, moving on. CRON, CRON, another cannabis play that very interested in. See how they come in with their earnings this week and see how it impacts the overall cannabis sector, right? So pull back to $13. The 200-day moving average, it could be an interesting spot to maybe start dipping the toe. But let's see how those earnings come in. I mean, it's got an interesting setup. It had a big run, and it's been pulling back. Let's see how those earnings come in and how it impacts the rest of the space. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, this is awesome. So now President Trump just came out and tweeted that he's raising tariffs on Chinese goods on Friday as talks are progressing too slowly. So it doesn't look like we're getting a China trade deal. And now he's talking about jacking those tariffs up to 25%. That could be a problem for the markets come next week. That's a bummer because, we had small caps just looking like they're getting ready to break out. And this is unbelievable. We're looking at making new highs, and then we get these tweets. That's not a good thing. That literally just hit. You guys heard it here live. And that could just adjust the whole game plan for the entire week. What a bummer. Okay. But, look, I'm still going to continue to look at the stocks. I'm still going to watch the market. Just going to be a little more cautious. So keep that in mind. All right. What else we got here? AMC. So look, I have started to build. I put out a trade plan for the pro members, And I actually have started to build a position in AMC. It's not actually. I want to look at this real quick and see how big the float is on AMC. I think it's fairly big float. No, it's not that big, really. 51 million shares in the float, and you've got 22% short interest in the name. Uh, you know, I think these guys, they're spending some capex. They've got a lot of debt, but they're creating a better experience. They're bringing in some bars. They're putting in, leather recliners, doing more gourmet type food to be served. They've got the Stubs program where they've got 19 million subscribers. I think it is an interesting turnaround story. I do not think theaters are dead. I just saw it for myself firsthand. One of my buddies that went to the movie, he hadn't been to the movie theaters in years. Loved it. So I think that I think that this is an interesting turnaround story. They have earnings on Thursday prior to the market open. And maybe after this Avengers Endgame, I think what it has proven to me is that if you have the content, people will go see it. They want to be social. They want to go, see the experience. It's so funny. I talked to other friends and they're like, yeah, man, I want to go see it too. I told them I was going to see Avengers Endgame. They're like, I want to go see it too. But, I got to stay off social media because I don't want to see any spoilers. People, if you've got the right content, they're going to the movies, and AMC is, I think, an interesting way to play it. So I've started building a position. I have a trade plan for the pro members. Let's see what those earnings. Look, if they report good earnings or give a good guide, and this thing pulls back into the $12, 11, I'd love to see a double bottom test down to $12. I'm going to add to the position. It's a long-term hold position. I don't think the movie theater is dead. I think that the best thing that ever happened to these guys was HMNY, Movie Pass, and them coming out with Stubs, and growing that subscription service where they can get the data and start marketing directly to their customer when they find movies that they think they might like, right? So off of your usage history. So I think it's pretty smart stuff. Anyway, all right, AMC, definitely keeping an eye on that one. Like I said, if it breaks down and comes down and tests the $12 mark, I'm going to add more aggressively. I just have a starter in it right now, and if it breaks out, well, guess what? I'm in it already, and I get to participate in that move. My dollar cost average is just around $15 a share or so right now. And actually, what I'm looking for is somewhere around $19 is kind of what I'm looking for as a target. Probably, I think maybe $17.50 or so. It could be a spot to take some off, and then let the rest run to $19, $20, somewhere in that range. And then EA Sports, this is where I'm going to end it here, in terms of earnings stocks to watch. EA Sports had a big pop. The Apex Legends is a big hit. It's actually, I think, put a little bit of a hurting on Fortnite. I'm a gamer. I'm an elderly gamer. And I still hear people talking about Apex Legends and how I need to download it. I'm gonna love it. I'm more of a Black Ops guy myself, but Call of Duty Black Ops. But a lot of positive chatter. This EA Sports has gotten beaten up pretty bad. This is more. It's a thick stock. It's more of a swing or long-term hold. Kind of had a double bottom already. Big pop when they announced the Apex Legends. I think whatever they have to announce off Apex, it could be interesting. If it breaks below $90, maybe we get a pullback into $81 range or so. If it comes back down here and tests this $76 area again, that could be an interesting spot for a long-term hold. But I have a feeling that what we might see is it actually break above this trend line and maybe reclaim the 50-day moving average. I'm probably going to have a bit of resistance at about 100, but worth keeping an eye on EA Sports. All right, and that is my entire list for earnings, the ones I'll be keeping an eye on for earnings. Pro members, I'll be getting your list of stocks to watch out to you very shortly. All right. It's a bummer about this Trump thing, man. Bummer about the Trump thing. That could put some pressure on the markets. That's a downer, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. Maybe we get something to contradict what he just said sometime during this week. Maybe he's trying to make something happen. I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. But that is a bummer, and it could play into a weak open come tomorrow. So be careful out there. Don't chase. Always have a plan. Know your risk reward. Know your time frame. Know how long. What kind of trade is it? Is it a day trade? Is it a swing trade? Is it a long-term investment? You have to know that before you go jumping into a stock. All right. Be careful out there. Have fun, and I'll see you next week.